Thank you very much. Been a lot of discussion was about hardware, and the military and hybrid war. But as Dr. Xu said, China is winning the narrative. But literally, they're winning the narrative not by buying off leaders nowadays, but through their propaganda machine. They're able to convince people, let's say, for example, CGTN. If you look at their Chinese government television network Facebook account, has 123 million subscribers. CNN has 30 million, BBC has 60 million, Al Jazeera has 27 million. If you combine these three, right, still Chinese government television network has more subscribers. Now, 8 to 13% of population in African countries watch CGTN. So, and then Xinhua News Agency has become a content seller or content creator for all the news media. So at least, of course, there's hardware and hybrid war, all that. But these are the things. For example, Facebook is banned in China. Can we persuade Facebook, if they're banning you, why not there be reciprocity? And you can't have Facebook with CGTN, So can we do something so that the narrative, mechanism through which they dominate the narrative are Western tools? The Chinese diplomats use Twitter, but Twitter is banned in China, so on and so forth. So to control the narrative, we must control the mechanism which are mainly Western oriented. Yeah.
Thank you. Responses?
Thank you for that question. So I did mention foreign interference in hybrid warfare. So foreign interference, I've written quite a bit about that, and that includes propaganda or telling a good story of China is how the CCP talks about it. So targeting elites is one aspect, but the propaganda narrative is a really essential part of it. Why are people watching CGTN in Africa? Because it's free. It's free to air. And, Australia was a really terrible thing happened in the Pacific a few years ago. The Australian government foolishly, when they were in a phase of cutting back, market liberalism, everything to the market, so they sold off their shortwave broadcast service in the Pacific. And a lot of people listened to shortwave broadcasts. And who bought the Australian frequency but China? And now Australian radio and television is playing catch-up in the Pacific, and so is Radio New Zealand and TVNZ, and they do offer some free-to-air content, but not enough across the Pacific. And so that's a real failing of our governments. They've had a very bad case of the Chicago School economics, and they cut back on public services. I can definitely say that for Australia and New Zealand, probably for Canada too, right? And so public goods have been underfunded for a very long time. Education is another one. I have been saying for 20 years in New Zealand that we need to invest in scholarships across the Pacific. We need Colombo Plan 2. And this is way before China started all the scholarships. And I remember in 2005 when China announced 2,000 scholarships to students in the Pacific, they had about 2 people a year taking up initially. No one wanted to go to China. It was going to take them years to learn Chinese before they'd go on to their studies. But now they do have a big take-up. And China's doing all this technical training too. And our governments are still talking about it. So that goes back to what I'm saying, before saying earlier, the level of urgency is not there that there would have been if it was kinetic warfare. Because it's foreign interference, and hybrid warfare includes propaganda, includes a whole range of tactics, then our governments can carry on this same old behaviour of not putting the money into exactly, as you say, where people's hearts and minds are being influenced, or even if they don't completely believe China on the China stuff, particular narratives are shaping in the Pacific. For example, Japan's release of the Fukushima water from after the nuclear accident from the earthquakes. China and Russia pushed a disinformation narrative about that, which had a big take-up across the Pacific. Actually, in New Caledonia, 4.5 months of riot, a near state of civil war, because of some things that French government did, particularly. But the narrative is very much a narrative that is one-sided narrative of what is going on there. It does not present the whole picture. And Russia, China, Azerbaijan pushing that, but helping to push that narrative and create it and turn it into an international narrative. So I agree with you. Propaganda, information is very, very important. But sadly, to echo Charles's words, our governments are still not stepping up and doing what they need to do and putting their money where their mouth is. But they have been putting a bit of money in, and it's the US started back in 2018 with the GEC. Started to put some money in. But my criticism on that is you are usually 10 years behind the rest of us in what you actually need to do. Like I saw one about gaming. There were some very niche things that have been done. And by the time the State Department works out that something needs to be researched, it's usually too late. So that's the problem with that fund, is it's very prescriptive. And my God, the political interference, if you get any of that money, I'll be discreet and won't tell you about something that happened to me. But it's not very good. So the US has put a little bit of money up, and it's been helpful. But the rest of our governments, it's too little and too slow, and it's quite dangerous.
Francisco, did you?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'll agree with a lot of what was said. The trend lines are very concerning. It's not just elite capture or just propaganda in sort of state media. It's the fact that the PRC is buying media, business media landscapes, entire property or the business sides of many of the journalists, particularly in Global South. It's the fact that where we are investing in some fellowships, thousands of journalists are going on junkets to all around China. So there's a asymmetrical advantage in terms of scale, and also to the fact that we believe in a free press. And so when we invest in journalism, it's because we want it to be independent and sustainable democratic institution where the PRC can use what some scholars at this forum would call sharp power, and certainly use the coercive elements of their funds to really manipulate that tool for their own political propaganda. To that, the U.S. certainly has been investing in democratic resilience. The U.S. made a huge announcement at the Democracy Summit on the Public Interest Fund, which is a consortium of supporting investigative journalism. We're trying to support more local content as well as local pockets of regional independent media, but also acknowledging that media takes many forms. And so in many of our development missions, it's not only traditional media, but sometimes it's getting information out through the radio or informal media like blogging is certainly popular in certain parts of the world. And so really being able to showcase what the United States and partners and sort of the Bretton Woods system or the multilateral rules-based international order has delivered for development needs has certainly been challenging, but it's something we're increasingly acknowledging and trying to correct.
Thanks. So Jen, I think nowhere is the battle of narratives more intense than in Taiwan, right? So do you want to say a few words about the Taiwanese approach?
Yeah, it is indeed, actually it's everyday phenomena that we are trying to counter China's narratives. The the tricky part is they play into our democracy. Just like Russia, China, is developing this strategy to pick up some narratives. Firstly, came from the opposition position in criticizing the government. Of course, that's very natural in a democracy. You always have criticism from the opposition as part of democracy. But they pick up some of the opposition narrative and then expand it, twist it, sometimes adding some disinformation or misinformation. Sometimes they hack into the government system and release that hacking document to the press, and as you know, and then as an ammunition for the opposition to criticize the government. They have tactics like that. So it becomes very difficult to deal with, especially in sometimes driving the wedge between Taiwan's relationship with partners, especially U.S. And other countries, and also undermining the public's trust or confidence in the government, especially in our military, especially during there is a Chinese maneuver. For example, early this morning, there was a maneuver from China, and there's tons of disinformation created in our media. So these are the things that we're countering every day. Another headache is TikTok. TikTok is not providing formal service in Taiwan, but the content of TikTok can be indirectly shared through other platforms, and they're exploiting our freedom of speech, and so it's very difficult to create a legal regulation that can be equally applied to other platforms, that you can really stop the content of TikTok from circulating. So these are all the challenges. And TikTok, they manipulate their young audiences, and then sometimes during the peacetime, ordinary time, they feed them entertainment content, but gradually they manipulate how they see things. So these are all challenges we deal with. However, I think the best strategy is to compete their narratives with our positive narrative. Because, we're racing with their narratives in our own democracy, and the best way is to promote our own democracy, positive narratives about our own democracy. And you have to, this is what President Lai is trying to achieve in his recent National Day speech, that is to create a greater domestic unity. I know this is not easy, because you have to find the commonality between the ruling party and the opposition party. In Taiwan, opposition party right now enjoys the majority. So you have to create that to consolidate our unity under our democracy. And the commonality is nothing else but democracy itself. So you have to consolidate people's confidence in democracy, and that will be the best way to counter China's narrative.
Great, thanks. So, Charles, you sometimes look like the lone warrior in Canada in the information scene, so do you want to say a few words about that?
Well, I think the first thing, pretty obvious, is it's not reciprocal. In other words, we have no access to trying to shape narratives inside China. I think the other aspect, which, I agree with all of you on this point, but the Chinese disinformation narratives are much more appealing than the truth. Canada, much as you said, a couple of years ago, decided to unfund the Radio Canada International Mandarin service. And I used to appear on that speaking in Chinese, thinking that I could, correct narratives domestically in Canada to people who might listen to Radio Canada International Mandarin service. So I don't think anybody listens to it. And I mean, nobody, it seems, that I know of reads the simplified Chinese character version or traditional Chinese character version of the New York Times. You know, the media that appeals to persons in Canada who like to consume Chinese media is just much more appealing to them than the truth. So it is a significant issue, and there is no media left in Canada, Chinese media, which is not under the control of Chinese narratives, except for the Falun Gong Epoch Times that, you know, has a unreliability problem and associated with an extreme political right-wing perspective. So we really are fighting a very difficult battle, and as I say, you know, the disinformation is more appealing than the truth. You know, if someone writes that the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau left his job as a drama teacher at the Fort Grey girls' school because of sexual misconduct, it's much more appealing than the truth, which seems to be that he just got bored and decided to quit. You know, and once the false allegation is made, the taint of the false allegation always continues to exist, even if it's completely refuted. And so I really think that this is a serious, serious problem, and I really don't know what we can do. I mean, people in Canada talk about, let's ban WeChat, but it really isn't practical. For one thing, I couldn't communicate with all of my former classmates and friends in China without WeChat. I mean, there is no other means to contact people except for that. So I don't know what the answer is. I really, but I think there again, it is a question of, are we putting enough resources into trying to counter China as best we can, and clearly we are not.
Right. Well, that's a little depressing.
Oh, sorry, Martin.
Now we still have some time for more questions. So there's. Yes, please. Microphone. Oh, okay.
Hi, it's Florindo